Back when I was a rock and roll musician, I always wanted to go on tour. It's kind of a dream many of us had, I'm sure, as rock musicians. And our band played a lot of gigs in New York City, a lot of clubs in New York, but never went on tour. I didn't go on tour until much later in life, when I was a well-established hypnotherapist and seminar leader in my own right. And I got a call from my old friend John Morgan, who needed some help with his John Morgan seminars. He did these hypnosis seminars for weight loss and smoking cessation. He had this really interesting way of advertising using the radio from his former life as a radio DJ, and needed some help with it. So I went on tour. I went from city to city to city. I can honestly say I have, over the 7 years I worked for his company, hypnotized tens of thousands of people. It was an amazing experience, and one I'm eternally grateful for. And I have as my guest today on this program, John Morgan. John Morgan is my guest in the Essential Coaching Skills podcast. He's an amazing guy with amazing stories and great insights and ideas. And gosh, what the heck are we waiting for? Let's go talk to him. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Welcome, John Morgan. It's so nice to see your face again, my friend. How are you?
It's always good to see Dougie, and I'm fine, and you look terrific, as usual.
Don't call me Dougie. There's people listening.
Well, I would call you what I normally call you, sweetheart. But
well, okay then. I'll go with Dougie then. But yeah, it's John Morgan. We've known each other a long time.
Yeah, it's over 30 years, 30-some.
Over 30 years. Yeah,
I think we met in 88, if I'm not mistaken. 1988 at a Dave Dobson.
It might have been 87, but probably 88. Yeah, I think your memory is probably better than mine. But yeah, Dave Dobson workshop out in Friday Harbor, Washington.
Yes, it was. It was. I remember Doug because he had his parachute pants at that time.
You always say that. I don't think I owned any parachute pants, but maybe they looked that way.
You were staying at hostels, and
I was staying in a hostel. That's true. I was still rock and rolling, man.
All I remember was there's something special about this kid.
Thank you. Were you there when I played piano at the bar?
I was.
And people sang and
yeah, we did blues songs.
Yeah, I taught you how to play the blues. That's right.
Yeah, well, you didn't teach me. I can't play the skin flute, but I mean, I was enjoying the heck out of you. We were making up lyrics too.
We were making up lyrics. Yeah, the old blues, 4-bar blues, or 16-bar blues, whatever, 12-bar blues. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that was fun times. I actually have a picture of us. I don't think you're actually in the pictures, of why I asked if you were there. But people sitting on the piano.
Picture of me sitting by the piano. I have one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. So Dave Dobson is certainly a place where we all got started, but more importantly, other than sitting around the piano, we both learned other than conscious communication and hypnosis, if you will, as Dave would call it, the phenomenon of hypnosis. Dave was a pretty important guy in our lives, I would say.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't use something that I learned from Dave. He was a curmudgeon. I mean, there was,
he was
no two ways about that. But he was a discovery machine. I mean, discovering, if you will, other than conscious communication and teaching it was like it was magic. I mean, I was steeped in traditional hypnosis at the time, and when I was exposed to him, it was like, you're kidding. This stuff is phenomenal. Like just the pattern that he taught, where you would tell somebody a joke, you would tell them they would tell you their angst,
their crappy story,
right, and then you would tell them back a joke in their patterns, and then ask them to go back and try and get the feelings associated with their yuck, and they couldn't. And I went, how did you come up with this?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. And yes, I have used that. I have taught that. And I always, of course, let people know that it comes from the late, great Dave Dobson. So how did you hear about him? Where you were steeped in traditional hypnosis? How did you find out about Dave?
All right. It was very interesting. Ties a little bit into your background. I was doing a radio talk show in Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, let me just stop you there. So for people who don't know, and I think that's most people listening, you had a long history in radio. You started off as a rock DJ, didn't you, back in the 60s?
Yeah, I was a disc jockey, a talk show host, a manager, program director, all of that kind of stuff.
Wow. Morgan in the morning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Morgan in the morning.
Yeah, so, and I worked in your hometown in Buffalo, too.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it Danny Nevereth?
Well, he worked at the competing station, Dan Nevereth, but he was the big dog.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, Dan Nevereth. Everybody remembers Dan from Buffalo. But anyway, I was in radio, and Tony Robbins was just coming up at that point, and I think he had just put out his book, and so we got him as an interview. Early on. In fact, I have a recording of that interview from back in the 80s.
No way.
Yeah, I do. And so anyway, at the end of the interview, he invited me to come down to his firewalk experience as his guest.
In New York City?
Yeah. So I went down. We were at some high school in Harlem. I think it was Harlem.
I believe it was the Upper West Side, but that's okay.
Okay, Upper West Side.
Because I was kind of running the show back then.
Well, I remember, aside from the evening, when there's Olatunji's out in the park, in the schoolyard playing the drums.
That was terribly cold that day too. There was like, let me on the fire, my feet are freezing.
Right, exactly. So I went there, and then he said, stay for the weekend, and we had a common person that we knew, and that was Harvey Diamond, who wrote the book Fit for Life. So we had that conversation. And then somewhere during the course of that weekend, he's talking about this guy named Dave Dobson, who's the world's best hypnotist. And I said, well, God, I got to know this guy, right? So as it turned out, after the seminar was over, the weekend was over, I went back home. Maybe a week or so later, I got a card in the mail that said Eric Oliver, who is Dave's second, Dave Dobson's second, was going to teach other than conscious communication in New York City at the home of the guy who was the psychologist at Bellevue. I can't remember the guy's name, but his wife was hosting it. Anyway, it was at their home. There were about 7 or 8 of us, and I went and sat with Eric and learned a little bit about Dave. And he said, well, maybe you ought to consider coming to one of Dave's workshops or fun shops.
Fun shops, yeah. Yeah.
And I said, okay, that sounds good. I said, when are they? He said, well, there's one in September. And this was summertime. There's one in September and one the following May. And I said, well, where are they? He says, oh, in the San Juan Islands. I said, oh, perfect. I said, September. I said, I'm going on a cruise. I'm going to San Juan, and that's one of the ports of call. I'll just stop in and say hi, He said, no.
Wrong San Juan.
These are the San Juan Islands up in the, off the coast of Washington. I went, oh. So I went the following fall, the May or fun show.
Spring, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I got introduced to Dave. It was through Tony Robbins, and
that's basically how I didn't do the Eric Oliver workshop. I wasn't invited to that one, but I met Dave at Tony Robbins at a certification course, I believe the previous year. And my experience with Dave was similarly like, what? This guy is amazing. Because, Tony Robbins was like this young, pounding on his chest, everything, live with passion, full scale of 0 to 10. You got to go to 11 kind of energy thing. Then Dave comes out on stage. He kind of strolls casually out on stage. I could swear he was smoking a cigarette at the time, but I don't think he was. That's just my memory of it. And just like this, like Santa Claus looking guy, kind of fat and white beard, and his hand on his hip kind of thing, and just I could swear he had a cigarette. But he started telling these stories in a kind of slow pace where there would be these pauses and this weird laughter that he'd have and these crazy jokes he'd tell. And I was fascinated by him. I was shocked at first, but fascinated ultimately. And then, I was also shocked at the 300 or so other people in the room who were all falling asleep to this guy. And I'm going like, what the heck is wrong with you people? These guys great. And I realized finally that he was kind of telling trance stories and hypnosis stories, and people were not falling asleep, but they were going into trance. And I was thinking, okay, I need to learn this stuff. How does he do that?
Right.
Do that. Yeah.
I mean, he was just a wizard. He really was. I mean, he was, like I said, he was a curmudgeon, but I liked him, because you knew Dave liked you if he took after you. In other words, if he came after you, he
must have liked me a lot then.
Oh yeah, he would come after you, that kind of stuff.
He must have liked me a lot.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So let's move on from there, because after we met, Dave, when did you start creating the John Morgan seminars? When did you start going out, leaving radio and going out into?
I did those in 1983, so it was.
Oh my God.
In advance of that, I was doing them locally in New England. I was working for a gentleman named Barry Beater, and he had associations with all the different hospitals and health stops. So we would do the Stop Smoking at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and, places like that. And basically, I learned the seminar business from him. What happened was I was on vacation in New Jersey somewhere in the early 80s. And I'm watching TV, and I'm seeing this guy named James Hoke. And he's doing hypnosis for childbirth or, on a local TV station out of Philadelphia. And I was fascinated by it. So I called the radio or the TV station after the interview, and I said, who is this guy? They gave me his number. I called him out in Michigan, and I said, I'm fascinated by what you were doing there. I do a little bit of this on my own. What would you recommend? And he said, my ex-business partner just moved back to Massachusetts. He's always looking for good people. So I found his ex-business partner. I went to him and he said, why don't you come to a couple of my seminars and see what I do? I did. And about the second seminar, I said, I can do that. He goes, well, I'm sure you're convinced. He said, but I'm not sure that I am. And then I just followed him around like a puppy dog. And eventually one night he invited me up to do one of the, inductions, as we call them, transitioning from conscious to, other than conscious, if you will. And he said, yeah, you really can do this. I said, yeah. So that is where it all began. And from there, I did his seminars throughout New England. And then somewhere along the way, I went out and did them on my own.
Cool. So I don't know what year it was, 2000 something. I don't know.
Us getting together?
Yes, when you called me and said.
That was 2004.
Okay.
Actually, you went to work in 2005, but we met in New York City, 2004. We had just procured the 5 biggest radio stations in America to run our commercials. And so we were doing seminars, 3 in Manhattan, couple in Connecticut, few in New Jersey, a couple out on Long Island. And, that's when you came, if I'm not mistaken, to the ones in Manhattan. At the one with the revolving restaurant at the top.
Marriott.
Yeah, that's it. So that was 1985. We did this.
Oh, you started doing them in 85, but this was
No. I'm saying the ones that we did in New York were 85.
2005.
Oh, did I say 85? Yeah, it's tough getting old.
Yeah, 2005. Yeah, and just so our radio listeners who may not know, what we're talking about is John Morgan seminars became somewhere along the line 2 seminars that you would do a 6 to 8 o'clock seminar for smoking cessation, and then those folks would leave the seminar room, and you'd get a whole nother crowd in there for a 8 to 10 o'clock seminar for weight loss.
Yeah, I mean that was we really needed additional help because we had a lot of seminars, and obviously you being associated with the business, there are not a lot of great people out there. And we were looking for, somebody to hand this off to. We didn't just want to hand it off to some jamoke, somebody that knew what they were doing. And that's your name immediately popped into my mind. I said to my partner, I said, this kid's great. I said, I wait till you meet him. And he fell in love with you. So.
Well, he kept looking for my parachute pants. So I thought, I don't know if he remembers me that clearly, actually. but it was really great. And it was a great gig for a long time. I really enjoyed that thing.
The thing is, I mean, it's, as you know, not only is it being skilled, I mean, obviously you're skilled, but people like you, I mean, they really do. I mean, it was evident, like when I was talking to my business partner, whom John Leslie, he said, people really like this guy. I said, yes, they do. So, I mean, you already had a leg up on everybody because, I don't know, it's sort of like everybody loves Chris, Chris Rock or whatever, and everybody loves Doug. And, the fact that you took that and laid your skills on top of it was, that was magic.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It was a privilege and an honor to work with the organization. And what I was really impressed by, and I'll tell you this, the formatting of the seminars that you put together, because you used a lot of Dave's stuff. I mean, maybe you started them in 83 before Dave, but by the time I saw him, you were using, the beach trip basically was the central induction for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, doing a lot of NLP things with the anchoring and the PSDS and things like that. Yeah, I remember very well. And so, it was amazing to watch you up there and, have a volunteer from the audience and step on one side of her and get a response of one kind and then anchor that response and then step over to the other side to have a spatial anchor for the other response. And
I have on my YouTube channel, I have that. I do. I have that whole scenario where I did this one woman in the smoking cessation. It's really cool to watch.
Wow. Where was it filmed? Is it the one that I saw in New York City?
That was done in Binghamton, New York.
Okay.
But this woman, she was, it was just one of those happy accidents where everything worked that night.
Yeah.
But
because, the thing is for me was that so interesting is that, having studied with Dave, both of us having done so, we understand about, interrupting patterns and changing, outgrowing the old pattern, growing into the new pattern idea. But most people, when they go to one of these seminars, they think that all that sort of talking and stuff is just talking and stuff.
Right. And they don't realize you're working.
Yeah. Like the entire time you're working with people. And then when you get to the hypnosis induction, it's kind of like icing on the cake.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you're doing a lot of hypnosis before you're doing as Dave would call it, a formal trance.
Yeah, or a tuxedo trance.
Right, exactly. But that particular anchoring thing happened to me. That's why I took it. When I took NLP training in Philadelphia back in the mid 80s before, I think either before or after Tony, I can't remember. John Grinder was in.
Uh-huh.
And there was a guy, David somebody, a British with an ascot, a big NLP guy.
Covers a lot of territory. I don't know all those
right, exactly.
ascots.
But anyway, they asked for a volunteer. They came up, and this guy was in front of the room, and he's talking, good stuff on this side, bad stuff on this side. I'm saying, what the heck's this guy doing? And all of a sudden, I'm doing all the changing. And I said, oh, wow, I got to be able to do it. That's where I learned it. And that's also from that seminar. I remember sitting there, and John Grinder, founder of NLP, or one of the founders, he said something, and I went, excuse me? I said, could you repeat that? Because I'm writing this down. And he said something that has stuck with me since. And he said, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And I went, oh, man. So, yeah.
Was that now that phrase I've heard, like, it seems like since I was a kid. Is that the first time you heard that phrase?
That was the first time I heard it, yeah.
Did he originate that?
Oh, I have no idea. All I know, I liked it. I said, could you say that again?
Yeah. Grinder's the only guy in the NLP, universe that I've never met. I've listened to a lot of his tapes and shit and stuff.
Yeah, right.
Sorry. I've never, I'll edit that in post.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, sure I will. But yeah, I never met the guy. So that's neat that you.
He was very interesting. There's a dichotomy. I mean, when you look at Bandler and Grinder, from what I saw of Bandler, that's where Tony got most of his showmanship. Mm-hmm. And Grinder was more of the straight ahead. How would I explain that? He was just a little more mellow. Mm-hmm. In other words, he wasn't as dynamic as Bandler or Tony.
Right, that's for sure. I mean, like I said, I've seen a lot of videos of him and tapes. It's funny, though, because Tony always used to talk more about being a student of Grinder's. He would cite Grinder all the time. He seemed to, have taken on a lot of Bandler's showmanship, if you will, his seminar savvy or something. But he would cite Grinder, so it's interesting.
Well, the thing is with Tony, I mean, to me, the beauty of Tony Robbins is not so much of all that he knows and all that he is. Obviously he's a mega success, but the thing is, he took something and made it marketable. In other words, he took something that was esoteric, if you will, and he basically took what he needed out of it to be able to market it. And, he just did a magnificent job of that, taking the pieces that would work for the public. I mean, he knew what people would buy into. Mm-hmm. He was very good like that.
Yeah, for sure.
For example, it's like like I said, you're really in touch with this community more so than me, but, there are people out there that can talk it. I mean, they can talk it forever, and you'll listen to them and they'll give you this and that and the other thing. And I mean, you'll go, oh, wow, I never knew that, but they can't do it. They can't do it. That was the thing that attracted me to you. I said, not only can this guy talk it, I said, he can do it. I said, he does it. And that's a rarity, because there are a lot of people out there that are just going to, blind you with their credentials of, what they know and how this works. And they'll explain it down deep into the weeds. But when it comes to putting it together and making it work, not so much.
Yeah. No, thank you again. Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliments. And I will say, I have made that a high value in my life, is to be able to, walk the talk, if you will. Yeah. And it just reminds me, Dave Dobson once told a story about Richard Bandler that maybe you were there, maybe you remember the story, that he had told some stories in a seminar. Dave often was there and would tell stories in seminars, and Richard was listening to him tell these stories. And Dave would be telling stories about working in a hospital and working in a burn unit and doing stories like that. And then he would attend a Richard Bandler seminar, and Richard would tell the same stories as if he had done them.
Oh yeah, he would commandeer Dave's experience, and Dave gave him shit for it. Yeah.
And the way that Dave told the story, at least in my memory, maybe you can corroborate this, is Dave was kind of unhappy, let's just say, with Richard having done this. And Dave has, no trouble showing that. There's no trouble at all showing his unhappiness. So he went to Richard afterwards and he basically said words to this effect. He said, "Gosh darn it, Richard." Words to that effect. If you want some experience, go get some.
Right.
Do you remember that story?
I do. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah. So in 1994, I volunteered for this. It's called the Department of Complementary Medicine at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, and I was working for pre-surgical hypnosis for heart patients who were going in for heart surgery, whether it was bypass or heart transplant surgery, with this young guy named Dr. Oz.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
At the time, he was a very well-known in the circles. He was a great heart surgeon. He hadn't written any books or gotten on any TV shows yet, but he was
running for office.
Yeah, right. He's running for office. But nevertheless, it was a great experience for me because obviously, it's not can you talk the talk; it's can you
do
the talk? Yeah.
Right.
So in those situations, you want to make sure you can actually do it.
Well, and it's funny because the guy I worked for in Massachusetts, he used to do in addition to his therapeutic seminars, once in a while, he would get a call to come in and do some stage hypnosis, right? And I had never done that.
The audience at home probably can't see those air quotes when you said
exactly. Yeah.
Stage hypnosis.
Yeah, they can hear it though. I mean, I think I communicated it. But anyway, I went to one of his shows and, being young and brash and everything, I said, I can do that. He says, okay. So he hired me to go to his cousin's synagogue to do this stage show. And it was just fabulous. It was just a lot of fun. But, I remember what Dave said. It's sort of like, he called stage hypnosis something like using a nuclear bomb to set off a cherry bomb or something. Why do you need that? And yeah, it became passé rather quickly for me. But, during the course of the seminars, every now and then I would do some of that as a convincer strategy. If people leaving the seminar, did something really happen here? They were wondering. Well, I get somebody on the way out and I tap them on the forehead and go sleep and they go like a rag doll, and, because who those folks are. I mean, stage hypnosis is basically paying attention to who's paying attention to you. You look out there and you tilt your head to one side and you see if anybody else is tilting their head. That's the person you invite up on stage. And usually the person, as memory serves, the person who was afraid of you was the guy who, by God, bet you can't hypnotize me. I knew he was afraid of me, and that would be the guy that you would, bounce off walls that weren't there and, all that kind of stuff. That was a fun little thing to learn, but it's, it's part of the picture and certainly not the whole thing.
All right. So John Morgan, you now have a podcast I want to talk to you about in a few minutes. But before I do that, this podcast is called the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, as I suspect you are aware. And not surprisingly, we talk about essential coaching skills here at the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And one of the questions I like to ask people such as yourself, the guests who come on here, is what do you consider to be an essential coaching skill? Like if somebody wants to, be better as a coach or get started as a coach, what's like a must-have skill that they need to have in order to be an effective coach?
Let me give that a little thought. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is sensory acuity. In other words,
tell us more about that. What does sensory acuity mean?
That means paying attention to what the person's not only saying, but what they're showing you, going back to other than conscious. Are they really giving you a line of crap or if you calibrate them for yes and no, like we know how to do, you can find out a little bit about that. But the congruity of the person is very important to me. And, so an essential coaching skill is being able to, it's hard to put into words. It's sort of like, I own this skill, and I think I got it from my mother, who was a waitress since the time she was 14. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. When I meet somebody, I know within seconds what their problem is. I don't know how I know. I just know. Now, how to address that problem is a whole different skill set, that takes a lot. But so to answer your question, an essential coaching skill for me would be knowing what their problem is right off the bat. I mean, I just, I guess you could get to that same thing by asking a few, questions that you would ask, somebody like yourself.
Somebody like me who doesn't have that extrasensory perception.
I think everybody has it.
Yeah. Do you?
I think.
So let's talk about it. So, there's a lot of things in what you've just said for the past 30 seconds that I want to unpack. Like, for instance, sensory acuity, congruency, how the other than conscious yes and the other than conscious no. Lots of stuff we could spend like hours talking about right now. But since we're talking about knowing their problem, within seconds, what do you mean by that? How specifically do you know their problem, and what do you mean by problem?
Well, I don't know. Maybe the problem is the wrong word. Their issue, their what they need help with.
Like, give me an example.
All right. So, for example, I can spot somebody that's angry at 1,000 paces.
Okay.
All right. They may be smiling. I say that's an angry person. All right. It just, I don't know. It just hits me. Like, I get a feeling, I get a sense like that is one angry person. And people say, well, no, he's a good guy. He's a joke teller. He's this. That's no. That guy is very, very angry.
Okay. And, so let me just stop you there. So you can, other than consciously pick up nonverbal cues from people that shows you
how I did it. I don't know. All I know is, but like I said, that's an interesting skill to have.
But what else does it encounter? I mean, like you can pick up an emotion. You're in an emotional state. What about like if somebody has a mother complex? Can you figure that out from the first 30 seconds of meeting somebody, or
I don't know that it would go that deep. I just get a blanket overall feeling that of what this person is dealing with, or they're afraid, they're overcompensating, they're narcissistic, it just is right there. I mean, it's like they can't hide from this part of me that recognizes it. I see it. Now, how to address it? That then you have to go into your bag of tricks and see what works and what doesn't,
Okay, cool.
Make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I just want to make sure that it makes sense from everyone, because I've known you a long time and we studied with a lot of the same people and stuff. So, worked in the same field for quite a bit of time. So yes, it makes sense to me. I just want to make sure that it makes sense to somebody who might not be operating the same wavelength that we are here. And I'm also seeing you, so I also can have that. And people who are listening to this will be just listening.
Well, let me backtrack a little bit.
Okay, good.
Draw on my earlier experience in radio. Right. Okay.
Good. Yeah.
So when I was a manager in radio or a program director, you get to hire people. Okay.
Okay.
And basically what you would hire folks on were their audition tapes or CDs or whatever they morphed to, MP3s. They would send in a sample of their work.
Okay.
Right. And so you would pop the cassette in or the CD into the machine, and you're looking for a new on-air personality, and I would put it in the machine and I would listen for 6 seconds. I'd say, this person can't work for me. Again, it's a skill that I got a long time ago that I don't know how I got by osmosis. I actually think I got it from my mother, who was serving the public since she was a kid. For example, I'll tell you a quick story.
Please.
I was working around the corner from my mother. She worked at this restaurant where she was the manager, and it was lunchtime and they were busy, and I worked around the corner. So I went over for lunch. So I'm sitting at the bar and having a Coke. I mean, I was a kid, and all of a sudden these three guys walked in, and my mother says to me, "Johnny, you see that guy over there?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "He's bad news." And I said, "Do you know him?" She goes, "No, I never saw him before." She said, "But he's bad news." I said, "How do you know that?" She said, "I don't know." She said, "But that guy's bad news." 3 weeks later, this guy was arrested for arson.
Huh.
That, I don't know how that happens, but she had that gift, and I get it too.
Okay. Do you think it is a extrasensory perception sort of gift?
No, I think everybody, it's like ESP. I think everybody's got a little bit of that. I mean, we're in tune with, other people. I mean, it's the same animating force that's animating you, that's animating me, that's making the grass green in India and China. I mean, there's some kind of commonality in there.
Okay. So, it's interesting that many years ago, gosh, it's weird being old. Like, yeah, it was yesterday. I think it was 40 years ago. Anyway, so Leslie Cameron Bandler, wife for a brief time, I think, of Richard Bandler, kept the name, had a seminar, a book, I think maybe it eventually became a book, about a person's internal basic question, that everybody has like a basic question that they take into any circumstance. And as an example, Mother Teresa probably had as her basic question, like, how can I serve, or how can I help? And wherever she went, whether it's a boardroom in Manhattan or an orphanage in Biafra, she'd be walking into this place going, how can I be of service? How can I serve the Lord here, or something like that? Right. Whereas somebody else who's maybe a tycoon and from that boardroom in Manhattan might be thinking, well, how can I profit from this? And wherever he goes, whether it's a boardroom in Manhattan or an orphanage in Biafra, he's like, how can I profit from this? So wherever they go, they have this internal basic question inside of their unconscious mind. And Leslie was saying, you can tell what the person's basic question is by the way they walk.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about that. I mean, there's something about patterns that, and then you get into your personality typing systems, whether it's Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or something like that, where you can see these commonalities in people. And, it's sort of like Dave said that NLP helped him come up with a language to describe what it was that he was doing.
Right.
Whereas, when I look at, and I'm not a student of the Enneagram or anything like that. I mean, I've seen it, but that gives me a framework as to why I feel this way about somebody. Mm-hmm. These people, or in Leslie Cameron Bandler's case, the basic question or whatever.
Yeah, she also, at least, I don't know if she said it or a friend of mine who took the seminar from her and learned how to do it from her. It's a whole long series of questions that you ask in order to finally get down to that basic question. He said there are a few people that don't have a basic question. They have a statement. And so when that, person walks in, it's a statement like, I'm here. Or something like that.
All right. So I'll tell you a quick story. We all know the name Harvey Weinstein. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you should know him because where you grew up, that's where he was from.
Harvey and Corky. Yes. Right. Very few people know. They were concert promoters in Buffalo in the 70s.
That's correct. And I worked in Buffalo in the 70s, and he would come into the station, and the guy that worked there my compadre, Don Burns, did his commercials. Had the big,
wow.
you know,
I remember those, yeah.
You know, he would do all their commercials. So it was maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I had occasion to be at Harvey Weinstein's house. And I won't go into why I was there.
Oh, come on.
No. It wasn't for Harvey. All right. So I was at Harvey Weinstein's house, and so I got to meet him, and I said, Harvey, I said, you have no reason to remember. I said, but we've already met. He goes, we have? And I said, yeah. I said, back in Buffalo. Oh, he goes, oh, yeah. He said, Don Burns. Oh, yeah, he used to do my commercials. So, we had that little thing. He went off on his merry way, and I did my work with whomever. And so he came back in after my session, and he started talking about, he knew I was into weight loss. And he says, yeah, my mother never cooked, and we didn't eat pizza, and we never had vegetables, and I hate vegetables and this and that. And, I got the agita and blah, blah, blah. And I said, Harvey, I said, you've certainly have enough people at your disposal to address that, some from a nutritionist standpoint. I said, the biggest thing for you, I said, is that anger that you have. And he turned to the other person. He goes, what'd you tell him? She said, we didn't even talk about you. Right. It was transparent to me that this guy was a bundle of anger. I mean, I didn't know he was a sexual predator, but there was something there that, it was just, and that's when I told him, I said, what you have to get a handle on is that you're just angry. You're not angry because of that son of a bitch. You're angry. You have the feeling of anger within you. I said, notice that feeling of anger. I said, when you notice it and you actually fully feel it, then you can morph it, out of your body. I said, but to ascribe it to somebody else, that just keeps it in place. They're the reason that I'm angry, and, that kind of stuff. So that's a application of this little skill that I got by osmosis.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Because a lot of times that's true for people, that they learn things at their knee of the mother or the father or the grandmother or the grandfather. Somewhere along the line, you absorb these skills, information, whatever, ways of thinking, ways of looking, and sometimes they're great, like this, and you can apply it, and you can find a way of applying it. Sometimes they're not so great. And you can find ways of applying it and finding ways of making it be useful. Because anger is a great emotion. There's no such thing as a negative emotion. It's how do you apply it? How do you utilize it? How it's like fire burns down whole neighborhoods in Colorado, and it's horrible, horrible thing. And it's also what's keeping my house warm right now when it's 10 degrees outside.
Right, exactly.
So you have to be able to marshal those forces for good, or for a good purpose. So, John Morgan, I realize we're running short on time here, and I feel like I've just started mining the depths of your experience and wisdom. Could you tell us a little bit about your podcast that has recently?
Well, yeah, I mean, different from yours, where you interview people. Maybe eventually I will do that, but to date, all I've done is about 15 years ago, I start writing a blog and a weekly essay I did called Grasshopper Notes. And if anybody wants to see them, they can go to my website, grasshoppernotes.com. And, what happened was I was keeping a journal when I was out doing seminars, and we were on the road as often as we were. I was, I would be on an airplane. All of a sudden I'd get a thought from out of the blue, and I'd write it down in my little journal. So I came home, and I'm sitting in my lazy boy chair, and my son walks in, and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm reading through some of the stuff that I wrote down. I said, the little thoughts that came to me. And he said, like what? I said, well, here's one. I said, how much would you bet on a grasshopper race if their legs were bound by the limitation of your thoughts? And he went, deep, right? Right. So that was that. Now it's a week later. I'm in the same easy chair. I'm looking over my notes from the week. I'm home now. And he walks into the room and he goes, oh, grasshopper notes. Right. And that's what I called it. And then I put out a blog post and a weekly essay. And so the podcast is basically me recording these writings that I've done for the past 15 years. I get an idea from out of the blue, and then I sort of like translate it and try and put it into everyday language that makes sense to people.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've really enjoyed listening to him. One of my favorite things to listen to in the morning is the Writer's Almanac. It used to be on NPR.
Yeah.
With, Garrison Keillor.
Oh, sure.
And you can still get it. I mean, he still does them. They're not on NPR anymore, but they're still out there. So you can go to writersalmanac.com or whatever. But he reads a poem on there. And his way of delivery and the poems and the chooses and stuff it's a great way to start the day. And similarly, the wonderful, beautiful radio voice that you have, the tonality that you use and the wisdom that come through these relatively short. I mean, your average podcast is what, 10 minutes maybe?
Oh, no. In my case, it's 2.5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Like back to earlier in our conversation, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but people do. And one of the things that I heard somebody say was, if they were shorter, I would probably listen to them. And so I've come up with this phrase, mini podcast. So that's, mini, right? Or I would have called it a pocket podcast, but that would have been a little too far out there. But mini, everybody seems to know what that is. In other words, it suggests to them, hey, I can take a little bit of time and I can listen to this. Yeah. I don't have to invest 45 minutes, an hour, or whatever it is.
Are you looking at me? Are you looking at me?
Are you looking at me?
Oh, we got to go. We're out of time here.
Oh, God. This has been fun. God, it's always great talking to you. I mean, I learn something every time I talk with you.
Oh, same.
And I really wanted to hear a little bit more about your havening stuff, but we can do that at another time.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, if you wouldn't mind being on again, I'd love to.
Oh, yeah. Let's do it again. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we'll have you back. John Morgan, thank you so much for your time. And once again, your website is grasshoppernotes.com.
Yeah. And the podcast is Grasshopper Notes Podcast. Okay. And wherever you get your favorite podcasts, they're there. And I have a YouTube channel too. It's called Inside Out, meaning that, all change happens on the inside before it manifests outside.
Right.
And on there are a lot of things that I've done over the years. It's all free. Whether it's my Stop Smoking seminar, or weight loss seminar, or
you got the whole seminar up there.
All of it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's all free. I mean,
Nice.
We closed the business. I said, well, this stuff, people can still use it. I mean, it's timeless. So I put it out there, and if anybody's interested, they can go find it. It's out there on the internet.
Inside Out.
No, it's called, what is it called? Hang on. Like I said, it's not getting old.
We'll put it on pause.
Inside Out. No. What, is that the name of it?
I don't know. First I've heard. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, just search John Morgan and you'll find it.
Cool. Is there a johnmorgan.com? Is there a John Morgan website?
No. We closed all that off. I mean, it's all under grasshoppernotes.com. And by the way, I wrote a book, as you're aware. Actually, I wrote a couple of them. And it's free. The book I wrote called Interruption, The Magic Key to Lasting Change, has a lot of the stuff that we talked about here, and Dave Dobson, et cetera, et cetera. And that's at grasshoppernotes.com. You can download a PDF. It's free.
Wow, that's a great book. Fantastic. Thank you, John Morgan.
Thank you, Dougie.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want any more information about today's show, please visit our website at www.essentialcoachingskills.com. Be sure to tune in again next week for our next episode and discover even more about the systems and the secrets that set the best apart.